From South Bend to Evansville and everywhere in between, this is Get In, the show focused on the Hoosier State and the incredible stories happening here today. I'm Nate Spangle, founder of Get Indiana, and I will be your host for today's conversation. On the show today, I am joined by Clay Robinson and Dave Colt, the co-founders of Sun King Brewery. Needs no introduction there, right, gentlemen? Sun King Brewery was founded back in 2009 with one simple mission: to just make beer. You were buying kegs. You were buying kegs from Circle V, and you were taking them up to Deer Creek, which is now obviously Ruoff or Verizon or whatever it's called now. And you were slinging those for $5.
Yeah, at fish shows and like Horde Festival, other music festivals.
Now that's entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
That's it right there. Launching Indianapolis's first production brewery since 1948. Now, fast forward to today, they literally this past weekend just celebrated their 15-year anniversary. Whoop.
That's right.
They now have locations in Carmel, Fishers, Kokomo, Mishawaka, the airport, and Sarasota, Florida, baby. Come on. I have been patiently waiting for this conversation for months now. Clay, Dave, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nate.
Hey, Nate.
Hello,
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
gentlemen. I'm pumped about this. We were talking a little bit when we turned on the mics here, that Sun King has just been a staple for me. Like, I mean, I'm 27 now, grew up like in the post Sun King era. So, I mean, growing up craft beer, like this was what I drank, like cream ale was a staple for me. So I'm pumped to have this conversation and learn a little bit more about the beginning, what you guys are doing now, and what's on the plate to come for Sun King Brewery.
If we could start with Sunlight Cream Ale for just a quick second, because you wandered into it, you mentioned it, let's get going. 40% of all beer made at Sun King Brewing Company is Sunlight Cream Ale.
Oh,
Yeah.
4 out of every 10.
4 out of every 10.
4 out of every 10.
Yeah, you're going to crack into that?
Well, you
You're going
said
to
let's
sample
start
up?
with it.
I mean-
yeah.
Nate said he'd like to drink beer on the podcast.
I said I'd love a
Okay.
good beer on the podcast. Come on, gentlemen.
So it turned out that Sunlight was not supposed to be our flagship. It was just a beer we made for the summer. When we opened up, we brewed our first batch of beer on July 1st of 2009, and we thought, what would be a good, refreshing summer beer? I know, Little Kings kind of thing, right? A little cream ale action, very Midwestern, very Jenny cream, upstate New York. And so we thought, let's make this. And so we did. And then, it went pretty quick. And we're like, okay, I mean, it's still cold, or it's still hot out, so let's make another batch. And we did that. And that one went quicker, but we're still like, okay, but it's fall now. Perhaps we won't. And we started, as we were of 4 people, we were 2 of the taproom employees as well. So we're filling growlers and
we opened our
beer
tap
and
room in
delivering.
September.
That's true.
So
And we're like, yeah, well, this is it. And we're going to move on to another season.
we brought out our Oktoberfest. We're like, Oktoberfest is here. Goodbye to summer seasonal. Hello, fall seasonal, because we wanted Sun King to be all about seasonality.
That was the thing, right? That was the shtick, was every season something new.
Yes.
Yep. All new
Yeah.
beers all the time, rotation of things. So real quick, cheers.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
There we
Thanks
go.
for having us.
That's good.
But we would have people, Dave and I'd be behind the literally our tap room. We ran out of money before we actually got open, and our tap room started with 4 Costco folding picnic tables, 3 Costco folding 6-foot tables. 2 of them were tasting tables where we poured beer samples over, and the other one was by the front door with a Costco cash register. And that was it. That was our tap room, and we would work in there. We were open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we'd sample beers, and these people would come up and be like, oh, well, I'm glad you like Sunlight. You should try Oktoberfest. It's our new seasonal. And they're like, yeah, but I really like Sunlight. And we're like, well, this is the last run of Sunlight because it's fall and we're a seasonal brewing company. And they would inevitably say, oh, my wife doesn't drink beer and she loves this. My dad hates craft beer and he loves this. My uncle thinks this is the best beer he's ever had. And it was like unanimous decision from our customers at that point in time that this beer should not go away. And we kind of looked at each other. We're like, well, everybody loves it. Like, let's just make it year round. And it became our first year round beer. And again, has steadily and consistently been 40% of all of our sales.
Wow.
For over a decade now.
For me now, when I think about the gold standard for local craft breweries, it's Sun King, right? Like for me.
Thank you.
From
That's
that,
very
I
nice
mean,
of
you
you,
guys
thanks.
are, I mean, you're crushing it in my eyes. From the outside looking in, it's like, oh man, if I started a brewery when I grew up, I would want to be Sun King. But it hasn't always been that way, right? You're talking about all these Costco cash registers and all that jazz. Like, take me back to 2009, maybe even 2008. like the time that happened and how this ended up coming to be Indiana's first, or not first commercial brewery, but first since 1948.
Yeah, first full-scale production brewery, because before Sun King, there were only brew pubs in Indiana. So you'd go have food and beer and dinner. You might grab a growler or a six-pack to go, but it was really on-site consumption.
Let's just educate the consumer a little bit. What's the difference between a brew pub and a brewery?
Well, they both are breweries. Brew pub has the restaurant/food element of it. So a brew pub is a restaurant with a brewery on site, or a brewery that is owned by the same company. There's a number of brew pubs now that maybe have satellite locations that don't have breweries, but they're still a pub, very food centric. We spent over a year trying to plan a restaurant brew pub because it's all that we knew, and we had Chef Craig Baker and another of our friends who was a restaurant manager, and we met every week and we talked about all of these great plans for this seasonal food and beer restaurant. And honestly, at the end of a year of Sunday meetings, we were looking at each other and we're like, we're no closer to getting this done. We couldn't find a location, we couldn't agree on a corporate structure, we couldn't come up with a name. We had a lot of good ideas, but meshing them all together were hard. And then we had the realization that it costs a lot of money to open a restaurant and a lot of money to open a brewery. And I personally was like, I don't care about food. It was like, I want to be a brewer. Like, what if we just make beer? Like, can that work?
Will the math?
Yes. Yeah, will the math. And yeah, if you know anything about me, the fact that I managed all of our Excel spreadsheets and original budgets is hilarious. But I'd been working on a business plan based off some other round numbers, and we had run a brewery for a year, and it was part of a few years together, and we'd both been professionally brewing
that how
for
you
10
guys
years.
met?
Oh,
no,
you want that?
This is
story.
way
I want to
back.
know where did you guys meet?
Yeah.
Just let's get in the time machine. Take me back, because I think that was even 10 years prior to that.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I started my brewing career in 1996 at a place called Circle V Brewing Company.
What if I told you that your brewing career is longer than my life?
I knew that when you said 27.
That almost came out
I
my
was
nose.
like, I'm 28, so I started before you were born.
There we go. That's how you know it's good.
That's how you know it's good. We're an overnight success at 28 years in. I was working at a brew pub, and I asked the guy who was a brewer and also owner, and I said, hey, can I help you, jump in there and make a beer? I've always loved beer ever since I was not old enough to actually legally have it. He said, yeah, be here tomorrow morning. So I jumped in the car in the morning, very excited, got there, helped him mash in. And that moment where, the grain, the grist, and the hot water meet, and it just is warm and wonderful and inviting. It smells like breakfast in your grandma's kitchen kind of thing. And I went, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
How old were you at this point?
Let's see, 30.
You were 30 when you said, I want to show up, and what was your role at the brew pub?
I was a bar manager.
So you're managing the bar, and you're just like, you know what? I want a little bit more. Like, I want to just go and do. And I think that there's just a thread that always pulls with the best like entrepreneurs and innovators. It's like, I'm going to sign up for more because I want to learn more about this so I can be better at my craft.
I had this recent conversation with somebody else and they were talking about a job and how they had gone ahead and just written this new plan for a program at their work because they cared about it and wanted to do it. And then they showed it and they were like, this is great. And they're adopting it company wide. And it's so interesting because there are a lot of people that I've met over the years are like, well, I want to do this thing. And you'll talk to them about it and they're like, so do I get paid extra to do the thing? And I'm like, you don't have an entrepreneurial mindset if that is the case. Like entrepreneurs do that. You're the person who's like, oh, I see an opportunity here. Let's go for that opportunity. I want to learn more. I want to do more. And it's those kinds of attitudes that we both have that have led us to where we are.
And it's like in the world somehow finds a way to make that right in the future, right? It's like if you put good out there and you go and just like, and you're naturally curious, right? It's like naturally curious about, I like beer, I enjoy beer, I've enjoyed beer for a long time. Like, might as well see how beer gets made, right?
Yeah.
So you're back there, you're doing that.
So he's bartending at Circle V and assistant brewing. I graduated from Wabash College in 1997. Yeah.
I'm a DePaul guy. So.
It's okay. We can still be friends.
All right, yeah.
You're wearing the Sun King hat in the Wabash colors, though. I might.
This is true. I've gotten a lot of comments on this hat.
It's a nice hat.
People love this hat.
So I graduated from college, had no idea what I was going to do with my life. While I was in college, I worked at an English pub and fell in love with good beer. It's called Joe's Bar and Grill, doesn't exist anymore. But after every shift, I got to have a shift beer, and they had 12 beers on tap, 12 import beers on tap, and another 50 microbrews at the time. And I could just pick a beer every day. And so I'd work 3 or 4 nights a week while I was in college, and every night I would drink a good beer. And I was just blown away by all the different flavors of beer. I had some friends who got into home brewing, and by the time I was graduating college, we were having parties with like homebrew kegs, or one of my buddies had done some work at Lafayette Brewing Company, and he would bring down kegs from Lafayette Brewing Company. So I get out of college and I'm like, man, I want to throw some parties. I had a bit of a rock and roll habit. I spent about 10 years of my life chasing fish around the country and world, and I wanted kegs of beer, so I wanted kegs for a party, and I called Oak and Barrel and Barley Island and all of these staple names. There were about 8 or 10 brew pubs around the greater Indianapolis area at the time, and none of them sold kegs. They wouldn't do it. And in our industry, kegs cost $150 a piece. You give it to somebody, they give you an $80 deposit, they take it home, they use it, they put it in their garage, and they bring it back 4 years later. So small breweries just don't like to deal with kegs a lot, or at least didn't at the time, and Circle V sold kegs. So I'm like, oh, I called, great, they sell kegs. So I drive my Volkswagen van up to Circle V.
Where's Circle V at?
Castleton.
It was. Yeah.
Was,
It was
yeah.
right behind the Starbucks right there.
Sparkling Image Car Wash.
Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm picturing it.
So I pull up to Circle V in my Volkswagen van. I had an 85 Volkswagen camper van. And I go in, and I got beard and long hair, and I talk to the guy, handsome fellow behind the bar, about beers. I try a handful of things. I choose Muddy Waters Brown Ale, fill out all the paperwork, have a pint of beer. He helps me load the keg in the car. Party goes great. People love the beer. I love rock and roll. Started buying, I think the statute of limitations is up. I started buying kegs of beer from Circle V to go to Deer Creek Music Center and sling $5 pints of fresh local beer out of the back of my van.
Wait, you were buying kegs. You were buying kegs from Circle V. Yeah. And you were taking them up to Deer Creek, which is now obviously Ruoff or Verizon or whatever it's called now. And you were slinging those for $5.
Yeah, at fish shows and like Horde Festival, other music
now
festivals.
Now that's entrepreneurial. Yeah. That's it right there.
Bootlegging.
So over time, I would see him over the year of '98. I worked at Roscoe's Tacos in Greenwood, where I grew up. I would basically just take time off to do rock and roll. But after 2 years at Roscoe's Tacos, the ends weren't quite meeting as a taco manager. And I was like, man, I need to make more money. I want to wait tables. So I started looking at places that I would want to wait tables at. I started doing interviews, and I shaved my beard down to a little thicker than this, just cleaned it up. I had a ponytail, and I'd go for job interviews, and they'd go great. And the guy, the middle-aged mustache manager would always say, well, you seem really great. We'd really love to have you, but there's just one problem. And I'd say, what's that? And they'd say, your facial hair. And I'm like, huh? And he's like, well, you can't have a beard. Late 90s beards were not in vogue. Like, you can't have a beard, but you can have a mustache. I'm like, okay, you have facial hair. He's like, yeah, it's a mustache. That's okay. You could have a mustache. I'm like, I don't want a mustache. Nor do I want to work here. Thank you. So after complaining about it, a friend of mine had a friend that went to IUPUI that worked at Rock Bottom, downtown Indianapolis. And she says to me, Brian works at Rock Bottom, and he has long hair and a beard, so they hire hippies. You should go work there.
They hire hippies.
And so I did. And that was actually...
So this was what led you to Rock Bottom was beards.
Yep. Was beards. I actually, it's a tenet that we hold true to today. A lot of what we did about Sun King in the years before starting it was talk about broader cultural things, about what we loved and hated about jobs that we had. We didn't actually talk about what kind of beers we were going to make until we got funded. And then we're like, oh crap, we got to make beers. Well, we know how to do that. That's the easy part. But how do you take care of your employees and give back to your communities and run a great business?
Well, you were a taco guy. How did you learn about beers?
So then I took a job at Rock Bottom part-time waiting tables. So I worked tacos and my Rock Bottom job. And then basically we did a beer tour, and the brewer at the time was named Tom. He does a beer tour. We do it with our staff today. You walk through the brewery, talk about how the beer is made. And by the end of it, he was probably 30. And by the end of it, I'm 24. And I'm like, wow, this guy makes beer for a living. Like, I love beer. I knew it was a job. I didn't know it was a job I could have. Hold on, this is super cool. So I would get done with work, talk to Tom over a beer, just ask a bunch of questions. And after a couple of months, one day he said, hey, did you ever think about making beer for a living? And I said, I didn't know it was a job someone like me could have until I met you. And he goes, well, you ask really great questions about beer. You've got a good head on your shoulder, and I've seen you running around here. You've got a great work ethic. I think you'd be a good brewer. And it just so happens that I'm moving on. Bill's coming in. My assistant Jackson's moving to Colorado. So there's a bunch of turnover right here. And Bill's going to need somebody with a good head on his shoulders and a good work ethic. So I'm going to introduce you to Bill. And if you guys get along, you can start a career making beer. And I was like, no shit. And he smiled and he sipped his beer and said, it's delicious. And I was like, all right, Tom. So I met Bill. We went to Broad Ripple Brew Pub, had lunch and a couple of beers, went and played pool at Old Pro's table, got along for 4 hours, and he said, I think I can hang out with you. You're hired. And he took me to Great Fermentations and bought me the new Complete Joy of home brewing and said, I'll see you on Monday at 6 a.m. And same thing as with Dave. We brewed an oatmeal stout, and the minute that grain hit the hot water and the smells came out, and you're in this little box with all this stainless steel equipment and hoses and pumps and loud rock and roll music, and you're just like, oh, I am home. This is awesome. It's like a sanctuary.
I love that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So time goes on, and then how do you guys get reconnected?
So Circle V fell on some hard times, and sad for them. But actually, lessons learned that carried forward to our business. So we knew a few things. It's a lot of times what not to do more so than it is what to do when you're kind of blazing your own trail. At that point, this place called the Ram started to open up, or it was going to get opened up. It was announced, and I went, ooh, that's a brewing job. I want this brewing job. I want to continue on this path. And so back in the day, this is before the internet, and to know things like where the corporate headquarters were, phone numbers for people. Where do you go? The library.
Ah, yes.
You know who likes to look stuff up? Librarians. They love it. I gave them a couple questions. They fired back with the information. And then I started calling Dave Hollow, who was the guy who was in charge of the brewing program for the Ram at the time. And I called him, and I didn't get a return call. So I called him the next day, did not get a return call. Called him the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day.
How many days are we talking?
I mean, it was probably about 2.5 weeks or so.
There it is. It shows up again. Persistence and just a little bit of that entrepreneurial grit, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're not going to answer. I'm going to keep calling until you answer.
Yeah. I mean, tell me no to screw off or whatever, but, I need to know. And so he finally called back and he goes, hey, please stop. And I said, okay, I will. I made the connection. That's what I was looking for. And he goes, I'll be in town at such and such a time, and then I'll, show up for the interview. So I did. They had somebody who they were bringing from, out west to be the brewer, but I got that assistant brewer gig, which was pretty cool. And then that fella moved on to Colorado, and I was left there standing, holding the bag. But to go back to
the meantime, I started brewing beer at Rock Bottom in 1999, which means my brewing career just hit 25 years.
Heck yeah.
And so the Ram was building out and opening up, and Bill was from Indianapolis, had moved to Colorado, started brewing at Rock Bottom in Colorado, and they had an opening in Indy, so he got moved back because he wanted to open his own brewery. So he's teaching me how to brew beer. It's an old school apprenticeship style. You work with a guy, teaches you everything you know. You spend every day together, learn how to clean things, and basically a lot of cleaning. And so then the Ram starts opening up. He's like, hey, there's a new brewery in town. We need to go say hi. So we fill up a growler. We walk down. It's not open. It's under construction. And we basically walk our way in like we know what we're doing, work our way back to the cooler and see the brewery, and work our way through the brewery and just walk in and are like, hey guys, welcome. We're from the Rock Bottom. Wanted to come by, say hi, welcome you to town. So we met John, who was Dave's boss, who became a dear friend of mine and was already on his way to a dear friend of his. And we're like, hey, Bill, Clay, John, Dave. We're kind of standing there for a second. Dave looks funny at me, and it's kind of that like, do we know each other? And it's that like Circle V Volkswagen van, like, oh, hey, we go way back, like haven't seen you in years, what's going on? So at that point it's just kind of like, hey, we now do the same thing down the street from each other, 3 blocks away from each other. So we spent a few years of visiting each other's tappings and stopping by on Friday afternoon for a beer and just getting to know each other. We talked about rock and roll music and life, and Dave was starting his family at the time, and life changes and all of the things, and just kind of became fast friends over the next few years.
But you guys work at competitors.
Yeah.
How can you be friends?
Oh, it's fighting against the man. So all, a rising tide carries all boats.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's a funny thing. We actually talk about this a lot because I like to call it co-opetition. So we're in competition, but we're also cooperating with other folks. And, we can probably talk about this a little later, but everybody looks at Sun King as this big entity that has been around, and we're this huge thing, and we're, ominous. Whereas the truth of the matter is that everything that we've built, we use to help our peers, because we've got a lab that we've invested over $1 million in, and we have 2 full-time people, and we do lab work for any other brewery in the state of Indiana. If you've got a beer that goes well or poorly, you want to run it through a tasting panel to see what's up with it. You want to run it through a piece of scientific equipment to check it for an infection or just see what's going on. We'll run your beer for you. We actually grow so much yeast in our own operation.
Small fee.
We do pay a small fee because we pay a lab.
I mean, you have a lab.
Yeah. So, but we offer lab services at a discounted prices to other Indiana breweries, and then we'll help them figure out what they might be experiencing and how they might address
yeast.
it. Yep, free
Okay,
yeast. So.
okay. You guys are talking about labs, and you're talking about all this stuff. Like, what is? It doesn't seem to me. I thought it was kind of like, okay, it's a brewery. You just like brew beer, and you drink beer, and
You'll have to come over for the Nickel tour. It's a great time. We'd love to have you.
I'm there. But talk to me then. That's a misconception. Like I'm saying, there's misconceptions about Sun King Brewery being this like war machine behemoth. Like what is the most common misconception when you think about breweries? And then we'll dive into Sun King in a little bit. But just breweries and brewers in general.
I think that it's easy. Right. And then you just kind of like you do a thing and then the next day, boom, you've got beer. And that's not even close. Like 2 weeks at the minimum, much longer, depending on if it's a lager. Alcohol content plays a part. Any special treatment, if we're adding fruit or what have you.
Well, speaking of lager.
This is a great.
Are you busting out a lager?
And to tie back to our inception, because we just recently relaunched Indianapolis Brewing Company, which is part of our heritage or lineage and roots. So the last full-scale production brewery in Indiana, which was closed due to the owner and tax evasion back in 1948.
I actually did look that up. Right, he was. They were like shorting their pours or something.
They were shorting their bottles.
So it's like you go to buy a 12-ounce bottle. Yeah, we'll give them 11. They won't notice.
11.2. No one will notice. Turns out someone would notice.
Somebody was paying attention.
Turns out like you hold them up to, you're like, something's weird here.
So this is not like the beer that they hung their hat on. We did some research and figured out the style of beer that would be popular. They were most popular for a Dortmunder, which is kind of a brown lager, which isn't a big seller. But what our big sellers are crispy, delicious, light lagers.
Oh, that's good stuff. IBC, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So misconception, right? That it's easy. Like when you said the word lab, I mean, when I think of, you're talking about like ponytail beard, kind of hippie type stuff, and then you're talking about a lab. Like those two don't like really mesh for me.
I mean, one of the coolest things I think about the business that we've built, our investors may beg to differ, but we've put everything that we've made back into the company as we've gone. So, I mean, when you look at us, and this is one of the funny things, like one of the biggest misconceptions about us, and we'll meet people all the time, they're like, oh, you own Sun King, you must be killing it. And there's this idea that because we own a successful business that we're magically millionaires. And we have a joke amongst us that we are
reverse millionaires.
That's right, because we owe a bank $1 million. It's not we're not rolling in any dough. We're paying bills just like everybody else. But as we've gone along, we have a lot of really great assets. We bought our brewing equipment. We've had to finance some. We've had a great partnership with First Merchants Bank, who helps us with financing and terms and growth. And they've been.
The First Merchants Bank is also the bank that represents Get Indiana.
Well, that is fantastic. So, solid plug. They're great people. They understand our business. We meet with them and talk about stuff. We meet and have beers and talk about where we're at, what our challenges are, where we're going, and they help us meet our needs as we've grown. So,
well, let's just dive into that then, right? So you just rolled over 15 years, and a lot of times from the outside looking in, you're like, Sun King is crushing it. You're available in many states. You have spots in Florida, and you have Kokomo and Fishers and Mishawaka. Tell me like the truth. Like, I mean, how does it feel? Like, I mean, put it in comparison. Like, how big you were? 5,000 barrels year one, and you're 30,000 now, and put that in comparison to like Anheuser-Busch.
They make millions.
I would say that the Bud distributor in Marion County sells more Bud than all of the craft breweries in the state. I mean, it's
in Marion County.
Just Marion County. Yeah, they sell like 50 million cases of Budweiser or something with all the events and sporting and everything.
Yeah, and the sponsorships and stuff, well deserved. They've been around for a very long time.
It's a solid, consistent beer.
And it's a very solid, consistent beer. So, It's just one of those. It's one of those things.
Yeah, like we make 30,000 barrels, which is 60,000 kegs of beer. And it sounds like a really large number. It's honestly more beer than we ever thought we could make. When we started the laws in Indiana, you could brew up to 20,000 barrels. We helped get them changed to 30,000 barrels. We've lobbied to change laws at least
Wait,
six
what do you
different
mean?
times.
What do you mean by that? Like there's a maximum on the amount that you can produce?
Yeah, well, there still is, but
Yeah, so John Hill and Greg Emick were two of the people with Lafayette Brewing Company and Broad Ripple Brewing Company that got the brewing
OGs.
laws. They were the OGs, got the laws changed. Greg Emick actually worked at Broad Ripple Brew Pub before moving to Lafayette to open his thing. And before Broad Ripple Brew Pub, it was illegal to have a brew pub in the state of Indiana. So that was the first beer lobbying effort,
Okay, all right.
which is probably almost 30 years ago now.
Oh,
They may have already hit 30, but they basically got the laws changed to where you could have a small brewery and a pub together. And when they did that, and honestly, we've lobbied a number of times, and however you lean politically, honestly, our legislature in Indiana is very pro-business. And if you go to them and say, hey, here's a problem that we're having, and you talk to your representatives, they'll help you work on figuring out how to navigate it. And sometimes it takes time. But so we've both been engaged and at times have been active lobbyists in the state of Indiana, just lobbying for pro-brewery related things. I was the president of the Brewers Guild for a while. Dave Colt is the current president of the Brewers Guild of Indiana.
Did you think that when you were touring around following fish, that you'd be lobbying the state of Indiana?
No. I have a really great picture of, I have a shaggy hair and a huge beard, and I'm in a suit, and I'm lobbying in 2015. And I'm at the podium, and we were trying to get the barrel limit raised past 30. And I'm literally like banging my fist on the podium and waving it in the air. And our PR company, which my sister ran at the time, was our PR company, sent me a screenshot, and she's like, "You were great. If you could refrain from banging your fist on the podium and waving it in the air, you might be a little more effective next time." But I was very passionate about what I was doing, and
you can't handle the truth moment.
It was very much you can't handle the truth moment, because they cut my time. I was supposed to have like 5 minutes, or like 3 minutes. I'm like, there was this little lady who was a representative there, and she just looked at me. She goes, "Take your time, honey. Just breathe. You'll be fine. We'll listen." And I was like, okay, thank you. By the end of it, she hugged me.
Yes.
But we started lobbying, and like we talked to Greg and John about it when we did our first push to change, and we're like, where did the 20,000 barrel limit come from? And he goes, we just pulled a number out of our heads that we thought no one would ever be able to achieve, and 20,000 seemed like inordinate amounts of beer until you came along. So
Well, so put that in comparison then. Right now you're doing 30,000 a year. Put that in comparison to other Indiana breweries that might be staple names that we know, love, drink, support.
We're the second largest in the state.
Yeah.
Upland, I believe, is third number wise, and then it kind of gets a little murky after that.
Three Floyds is the largest brewery in the state. They're in 20-some states. They have Chicago as their backyard, which has 10 million people. And honestly, if you go anywhere in the world, being from Indiana, and part of our gig as starting a great Indiana brewery is to showcase how awesome Indiana is. It's a part of an early conversation we had about the brewery and bringing accolades, because it's a flyover state. People overlook Indiana all the time. We always have this aw shucks Hoosier-y kind of thing where we don't want to boast. And when I talk to people all over, they're like, "Oh, Three Floyds, yeah, it's in Chicago." I'm like, "No, it's actually in Indiana." They're like, "No shit."
Surprise.
But they do 100,000 barrels of beer, which is 3 times as large as us. Rheingeist is another popular brewery in our area, only out of Cincy. We helped them get started, and they're like our little big brother, because they've blown up to over 100,000 barrels as well.
Holy smokes! They're not that old either, right?
They just turned 10. They're 5 years behind us.
Oh my gosh!
But like that co-opetition thing, their head brewer worked at Lilly. He got downsized, was a friend of ours and a home brewer, and he couldn't take another job because of his severance, so he volunteered to come in and clean kegs for like a year while his severance was going on. And during that year, he started getting interested in learning more about brewing, and once his severance was over and he could take a job, we didn't have a lab, and he was like, "Hey, I'll help you build out your lab if you'll teach me how to brew on a professional level."
Master's degree chemist from Lilly. So.
That'll do. That'll play.
Yeah. So that's how our lab started, was with Jim Matt, and then we met some guys who were going to move to Cincinnati and start Rheingeist at the Craft Brewers Conference one year, and we're like, "Oh, you guys are great. You're doing Cincinnati. What are you doing for a brewer?" Our friend Jim moved to Cincinnati because his girlfriend lives there, and he's at Christian Moorline right now, and you should meet him. And 6 months later, bada bing, bada boom, they got a brewer.
Now they're just ripping.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So Ryan Geist Brewery in Cincinnati got its start somehow with some ties to Indianapolis.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. So that's all. And now they're just rocking and rolling. I love that. Yeah. Are you guys friends with the three Floyds guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is co-opetition, right? It's like
it is.
It's just against the big beer,
it's
right?
Machine.
Yeah. It is. And honestly, I mean, so in our lobbying efforts, there were some times because you kind of got to give and take. And there were a couple times in our efforts to get more out of the rules that would allow us to grow that we had people approach us with unsavory opportunities, if you will. They'd say things like, we'll give you everything if you want, because Indiana is one of the handful of states that allows for self-distribution. So when we started Sun King, we delivered all of our own beer. It all started going out in my Volkswagen van or Volvo station wagon, our partner Andy's truck. He lived on the north side, I lived on the south side. We'd run beers around the city during the day, and each of us would take runs to the north and south at the end of the night. You would text one of us for your orders. We would put it on a chalkboard, and then we would deliver it the next day. And we did that, and then we got another guy, and then we got another guy, and then we built a team, and at one time we ran 12 people in the logistics department.
Sounds right.
And did 120 to 140 stops a day delivering beer all over the city. But we also, as we were growing, we wanted to go to grocery stores. And in grocery stores in Indiana, they don't touch beer. The beer distributor moves the beer from the back to the front. And we had never sold beer in grocery stores before. So in 2013, Dave and I are talking because I'm going to parties and my friends' wives are like, oh, I was going to get Sun King, but they were out. And I'd say, they were out? And where'd you shop? Kroger? I'm like, oh, we don't sell beer in grocery stores. And they go, why not? And I'd start to tell them about warm beer versus cold beer and not having a lab structure that would allow us to make sure that this beer sitting on a shelf in a grocery store, if it were there for 2 months, would taste as good as it does today. And all of our morals about making the best beer and our brewer's intention, and they would tune out. And I'm like, we gotta work really hard and figure this out. We gotta figure this out and figure out how to get to grocery stores. But in figuring out how to get to grocery stores, we also needed to figure out how to make and sell more beer because there's a lot of grocery stores, and we had to figure out how to get it there. So we started working with Monarch on how we transition our distribution over to Monarch so that they would do grocery stores, but at the same time we couldn't make more than, we were at like 28,000 barrels at that time, and we couldn't make any more beer. And so we needed to change the law, and some of the people would say things like, if you'll give up self-distribution for all breweries in Indiana, you can have however much beer you want to make. So they that it's a lobbyist thing, and so some of the distributors have their own lobbyists. We had great support from one set of distributors and great fight from another set, and the other set was basically like, hey, if you'll sell out all of your comrades in the state so that no one can self-distribute anymore, then we'll let you have the moon. And we were like, no, we will not do it. I'm sorry, like we want everything we want.
But you guys had the power for that.
Yeah,
like, to put it in perspective, like Sun King had a lot of power there. Like you guys could have chose to be the like.
This was like the
good for us, not like screw those guys.
Yeah, this was the third time we'd lobbied for law changes, and we'd been doing successfully what we wanted. This was very important because it involved what turned into millions of dollars of investment into the brewery, increased lab, better equipment, more equipment, back to the we just reinvest everything. It's like we've got to put this money, we've got to invest millions of dollars, some of which we're borrowing, most of which we're borrowing, in better equipment, more equipment, and shout out to First Merchants.
Thank you.
And more people to do the jobs that go with it. And so we're doing all this, and it was one of those things. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. We will fight and we will tell our story and we will win, but we are not going to sell out everybody else, because regardless of what you might think as a small brewer in Indiana, if you've never met us or never taken the tour or come by to hang out, which we welcome all, for sure, you would think, oh, big bad Sun King sometimes, but we fought to keep that. We think it's important for small breweries to have the access. If you got a bar across the street or whatever, for us, it was a major step towards growth that allowed us to get where we are, and the idea of selling it out so that other places can't. Like, I currently live in Florida because of our operations down there. You can't self-distribute in Florida. So if you have we've got a brewery and we've got a bar 3 blocks down the street, the beer has to go to our distributor, sit there for a day, go back through the system, and come back on one of their trucks with a bunch of other stuff. And so it's a huge impediment to small breweries. And part of the reason we even went to Florida, we're like, whoa, the Florida market is like 10 years behind everybody else. And it's like, oh, why? Well, their distribution laws aren't favorable towards small brewers, but we are at a size now where we can take advantage of distribution networks and work within the system because we learned the system the hard way over the years.
Wow. I mean, that's super interesting. And I think that you guys might get not a bad rap, but just like this big overarching, machine vibe.
It's the thing people say all the time. They're like, oh, Sun King is everywhere. And we're a lot of places, but again, we worked really hard to get to those places. The community programs we built over the years to give back. We've got a 1/3 in-kind donation program that if you're with any nonprofit in the state of Indiana and you want to throw a fundraiser and buy beer, and we will sell it to you essentially at cost. The first 2/3 of beer is overhead and people and costs, cost of goods. But we will sell it to you, and then you can set up a bar and turn around and sell beers for $6 or $7 a piece, and then you can keep all of the profits for them. So you get discounted beers, we get our bills covered, and you can make money for your organization.
Well, let's talk about that. Then it feels like Sun King's everywhere. Size, scope, right? 30,000 barrel. Has the law changed? What is the law? Like, where are we at now?
The law is now you can make and self-distribute up to 30,000 barrels. Once you pass 30,000 barrels, you have to work with a distributor.
Do you guys still
exclusively.
self-distribute?
We do not.
No, everything. It's just like built in the, like with scale comes processes, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And it seems like, right, that first, 4 to 5 years was like, we're a startup. We're figuring it out. Like I read all these, there's articles you can go find out that are just like hilarious. Haircut day, like all that fun stuff. And then it seems like you went through this like scale up phase where you're going and you're getting known everywhere and you're like, oh man, they're really crushing it. Sun King's everywhere. And then obviously like the pandemic happens and life changes a little bit. And like give us the scope of like what happened through the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say that our decision in 2013 to make a move toward grocery is the thing that really saved our ass. Because everything went to grocery. You couldn't buy beer.
How hard is it to get if you start a brewery, how hard is it to get into a grocery store?
It's pretty hard.
Pretty hard these days.
Yeah, you have to lobby the organization.
Like you got to get a buyer, right? Like they have to.
We have Joe Burns, who was our full sales manager, but now runs our Florida market and oversees our salespeople in Florida. But other 25% of his job is chain management, and he deals with Meijer, Kroger, Walmart, Target, Benny's.
What was the first grocery store you got into? Kroger. So you had to go to Kroger and be like, hey, like just one specific location?
With that, the Monarch side helps us because once we were with Monarch and we had this plan, we were able to go to Kroger with Monarch and say, hey, we're going to be launching into grocery stores. And we would love to, here's our sales data.
Yep. Yeah. Here's our scan data from package stores and all that kind of good stuff. So they could see, oh yes, there's latent potential.
So the pandemic thing, we could probably talk for 3 hours on because it was our master's degree in business management.
Oh boy!
But we fortunately, we pulled my dad out of retirement to be the business mind of Sun King at 70.
What year
was
this?
This was in 2009 when we opened up.
Okay.
So he came on and advised us in 2008
this is
on
Omar,
the business
right?
plan. This is Omar. I always just call him Omar because actually there's some funny anecdote stories about bank meetings or something, it's like, hold on, let me ask my dad. So I'm like, oh, Omar.
Yeah.
But when he left, Dave and I took over as co-CEOs. We were like, okay, neither one of us want this job. So somebody's got to do it. So let's suck it up and both do it. Because honestly, as people, we balance each other pretty well. And we make like one complete human. We're both a little off, but we work well together, and we've worked well a lot for a long time together, which is helpful.
Any business that survives 15 years, like kudos to you guys. And partners that survive 15 years, like that's even more impressive.
If we flip back to the beginning too, I mean, Dave and I were both approached by people with money that wanted to open breweries, and we knew immediately that we didn't want to open that person's brewery because they had ideas about what they wanted to do, and they needed us to make the beer part happen, which is what drove us to looking at each other and going.
Talk to me about the original funding. How did two brewers in downtown Indianapolis open up a brewery?
Yeah,
just accidentally, very, very strangely. So as we get approached and people are coming at us and we're like, maybe we should try to find money, right? So
like if we open these breweries, we're going to be in the same position doing something we love for people we don't necessarily agree with. And half the time they want one of us, not both of us, because they don't want to pay both of us or give us any equity. And their equity offers are like 5% after a handful of years. And I'm like, I was raised by an entrepreneur, and I was like, what? Why? These people with money need us. Why wouldn't two guys who we know each other well, we see eye to eye, we can genuinely work together. We'd been running a brewery together for 3 years with very successful results and grinding through it all. I'm like, why wouldn't two guys like us put together a plan and find the people with money?
You can find the money. And that's like the flip for, I think, that gets people to take entrepreneurial leaps, is that like the money ends up being the easier part. It's like finding the business and like that piece.
Finding the building was the hard part. We thought money would take months and the building would be like, there's buildings everywhere. Building took 13 buildings in 6 months. Money took 1 day.
So our third partner comes into the scene here. Andy
Take it all the way back.
all the way back to Circle V. And so Andy ran a successful engineering company, and he would come have lunch. His employees would come have lunch. I knew Andy very well because I was bartending at the time and also assistant brewing. And so we'd had a great conversation. Over the course of time, we lost touch because Circle V closed. He ended up selling his business off. But I ran into him at the Ram that was on the north side of town because that's where he lived. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Andy, how you doing? Great conversation. And I said, I'm starting up a brewery with some people, and I know you've been pitched a million times over, and we want you just to absolutely pepper and drill holes through our gray sky proposal, our gray sky proposal. And he goes, okay, great. Let me hear the pitch.
So I had, in my off time, I took a few years off between Rock Bottom and the Ram to figure out what I was going to do with my life.
More rock and roll.
More rock and roll. I chased rock and roll, slept on couches, read books, and worked part-time construction for 3 years while I burned my 401k that I cashed in at 28 years old.
All right.
Because I wasn't going to ever be old enough to retire. So fuck it, let's spend. So during that period, I spent my 401k. I amassed $20,000 worth of debt. I needed a job, and the phone rang, and it was Dave. And he was like, hey, Clay, what's going on? I'm like, not much. He's like, are you in town? I'm like, yeah, I'm in town for a while. I'm in town now. Still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And he's like, oh, that's great. Do you have Dustin's number? And I was like, Dustin's number? What do you want Dustin's number for? And he's like, well, he knows how to brew, and I need an assistant brewer that's going to, the Ram's expanding. And I was like, well, Dustin's opening a bar. He was opening Spencer Stadium Tavern. I was like, Dustin's opening a bar, so he's got a gig, but I need a job. And Dave's like, I thought you were done. And I was like, I was done, but I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And when can I come talk to you? This afternoon? Great.
Yes.
So I went and talked to Dave. All of this other stuff transpires. We asked Andy to look at the business plan. I left in June of 2008, went home with my wife to Alaska for 2 months where she was born and raised. She worked on fishing boats, deckhanding, halibut fishing.
Oh, she must be a badass.
She's a badass. She's like 5'4" worth of badass, but she'll gut a fish in 38 seconds.
Did she grow 2 inches since I saw her last?
Yeah, I'd like to tell her she's 5'4". She might be 5'3¼ I don't know. I never get it right. Plus, she always wears shoes. Throws me off.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then I came home from there, and actually everyone thought I would disappear to Alaska and never come back when I told people what I was doing, because it seems like a place that I would go and never return from. Mm-hmm. But Dave and I, we even had it tough. He's like, "Are you fucking coming back?" I'm like, "I'm coming back, man. I gotta clear my head." I helped her parents remodel their house. I spent the summer up there. My dad came up, helped me remodel my in-laws' house. 10 of us lived in a 3-bedroom cabin with 1 bathroom. It was like a melee, and I'm like, I'm gonna marry this girl, and you're going to get along with her parents, and let's go. So we lived together for a month, did this project. I was up there for another month. Came home, literally wore my pajamas all day and wrote a business plan while drinking Miller High Life, because that's the only beer I could afford at the time. So my wife would pick it up at the grocery store.
Aside from the occasion.
And then on Thursdays, I would go meet Dave, the only other person who knew I existed in Indianapolis anymore. And I'd go meet Dave, and I'd have beers with him, and then I'd take a growler of IPA home with me so that I had something else to drink. And I spent like 6 weeks just writing the business plan, putting all the thoughts that we had together into words. My degree from Wabash is in rhetoric, with an area concentration in business. So
I bet you couldn't tell.
I wrote all the flowery language for it, and put all the spreadsheets together. But I had, in my meantime, I'd written 6 business plans between leaving my last job and being a part-time hippie rock and roll junkie, for various bars, restaurants, different things I wanted to do, a live music venue that I thought we needed at one point in time with Dustin, who already had a gig, and eventually opened Duke's Honky Tonk.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yep, R.I.P.D.
R.I.P.D.
So anyway, but every one of them I'd take to somebody like Andy, and I always had this blue sky in, and I'm like, oh, and I'll put the numbers together, and you're just going to assume growth, and I'd always get just busted down. It's like, well, when you go from year 2 to 3, there's this giant jump, and how do you get this giant jump, and where does this come from, and how do you justify this? And I'd leave these meetings feeling demeaned. So when I wrote the Sun King business plan, it was gray sky, bare bones, brass tacks. These 2 guys need a job. He's got a family. We forgot that there's a self-employment tax that you get hit by as an entrepreneur. So the amount of money that we actually needed to live was lessened a lot by taxes. So we found ourselves upside down after our first year with our personal finances because we miscalculated. So entrepreneurs, remember that. If you're paying yourself, you got to pay the government your taxes still.
Yes.
Build that into your salary if you can afford to build in a salary. So Dave set up a meeting. Unfortunately, Dave can't make the meeting. It's a very auspicious beginning to Sun King because Dave had won a medal at the Great American Beer Festival the prior year. I think maybe his second medal for a barrel-aged beer. Yep. And he and I had entries in this year, so we hatched a plan and we brewed 2 different beers, a stout and then it was a Belgian triple.
It was a triple.
The Belgian triple. Put one in Buffalo Trace barrels, the stout and Jack Daniels barrels, let him age. I actually had left the Ram. Dave pulled him out, entered him into the competition. He got a free trip because he'd won the year before. So it leaves it on me and Omar to go meet with Andy. So we meet at the Fishers on the north side. We have lunch and some beers. We pull out the folders I built. We look over the business plans. We start looking at budgets. It's 2008. There was a hop fire that killed like 40% of the America's hop. So hops were a thing. NPR was talking about it all the time. He's like, I hear there's a hop shortage. What are you going to do about that? I'm like, if you'll turn to page 3 of your addendum, you'll see our hop contracts because Dave stayed behind and organized our hop contracts, grain contracts, all of our things with our suppliers during the year that I was working on the rest of the business plan stuff. And we were working to find spaces. So we had all of the answers. And his wife comes and joins us, Anna. They're lovely people. We're having beers and lunch and talking and asking questions and talking about our vision. And at the end of it, Andy looks at Anna and they're like, all right, we're in. And I'm like, all right, great, you're in. That's fantastic. Super happy to have you on board. Thank you very much. We'll pay the bill. Go in the car, get in the car with my dad. I look at him as I start in the car and go, did we just get funded? And he goes, I don't know. That meeting went really, really well. I didn't want to ask too many questions. Like, they're in. I'll just call tomorrow to see how far in is. But before he can call, Dave calls Clay.
Mm-hmm. It turns out the 2 beers that we sent both won medals at the Great American Beer Festival. We won silver and gold for those very beers that Clay mentioned. So before we're funded, we didn't know how much funded was, but in order to make that phone call back, then Omar got to say, oh, by the way.
Have you talked to Dave?
Yeah. This happened overnight while you were sleeping, and are you guys in?
Yes. How far in is in?
How far in is in?
How far in is in? And the answer was all the way. He basically was like, we're all the way in. He's like, I'd like to create an investment group and spread it out, but I don't want to take all the risk. I'd like to spread it out between my parents, my neighbors, some friends and family who've done well and would like to be part of an investment group. And we're like, cool, we'll create you create an investment LLC. You're the single person the representative, so we don't have 12 investors to talk to. Also a good tip out there if you're putting together an investment group. So Andy was our key point. He talks to his 12 people and he talks to us. And he also wanted, because he'd been kind of part-time, living his life because he sold his company and he's like, can I just deliver a beer or do whatever? Can I have a part-time job? And it turned out to be his money. So he was our CFO for a while. He ran the books, the QuickBooks, all of the various things. And it turned out to be me, Dave, and Omar being the 4 full-time folks. And then Steve is our attorney partner who has a small percentage of the business and looks over all our contracts, does all of our legal work and all of that stuff.
You guys just busted a myth. I don't know if you even know there was a myth about it. The myth that Sun King was founded by someone who won the lottery or something like that.
Actually, Andy did win the lottery.
Oh, all right. So wait, so myth is... Okay, wait.
We brought Andy on.
Yes.
The place was founded by Clay and myself.
Yes.
Okay.
So we founded it. We brought Andy in as our investor. So Andy's a Rose Holman graduate with a master's degree in applied optics.
He's a smart dude.
He started his own engineering company that wrote engineering software. Eventually, this is the Circle V days, around the turn of the century, around 2000 or so, sells it to his largest customer, like the whole software game, sells it to his largest customer. So sells a company that he's built from nothing and does well for himself. And then somewhere around the same time, he won the lottery. But turn of the century, Indiana lottery was like $1 million.
It's still money.
It's still $1 million. I don't want to.
Yeah.
But now lottery is
Well,
huge.
then he double hit the lottery when he invested in Sun King Brewery.
Damn
That's right.
straight.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, I swore.
Oh no, it's fine.
I've sworn a few times. I'm trying to refrain.
Come
but-
on, it's all fair game there. All right, so obviously, I think we might need one more.
wait.
One more as we're.
I think we should have Nate pick on
Oh yeah,
this
what
one.
would you like to try? I was just going to go to Pachanga and move up. Down
I
that
mean,
road.
I am all in. We have a little bit of branding here with the Bell Sun King collab. Is that this guy right here?
That is
that's
it.
our
You can
15th
crack it.
anniversary.
Oh,
Go right
buddy,
ahead.
let's go. We got the
Paloma Loma.
Paloma Loma. This is going to be, grapefruit and agave. Come on. Is this a little bit of GFJ action similar? Or no?
It is in the sense that there's grapefruit, but here we took like 100 pounds of grapefruit and limes. We zested them. We juiced them. We added some grapefruit terpenes in there. We added agave, so you can, when you get a sense of it at the end, it has that nice like little kiss of agave, that little hint of citrus and a little spicy pepper character. There's some nice dankness in here, so you know it's an IPA.
All right.
And gosh darn it.
It was like one of
the
another crazy idea. We were like, hey, for our 15th anniversary, let's get a whale to make a beer with us. So
It's wild to me. I love it. There's still whale breweries to you guys.
yeah,
To Sun King.
so many.
You go out there and you find Bell's. Put it in perspective, how big is Bell's compared to Sun King?
200 times.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
Oh,
Yeah, there's 600,000.
600,000 barrels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're a whale.
So
They
yeah,
are a whale.
and they're now merged with New Belgium, which is 1 million barrels. So the two of them together.
So
are
do
like
you just
1.8
like,
million.
who do you call there? You just like have a
So
friend?
this is a 10-year conversation to try and get Bell's to do a collab with us. Hilariously, and we went almost all the way to the top. We went to Laura Bell, Larry's daughter.
Maybe you've heard.
Maybe you've
Laura.
heard of her. So we went to Laura Bell and we're like, Laura, please do a collab with us. This is really cool. These are the reasons why, so on and so forth. And she goes, I don't know. I'll check it out and see if I can. No response. She ascends to the president. I'm like, hey, don't forget us. Let's do this collab. It'll be fun. Just come on down. It'll be fun. And hey, thanks for that. Blah, blah, blah. No response on it. More conversation. She quits. We're like, oh, well, that was our in. I guess we're out. And then lo and behold, a friend of ours in the business, Alec Mole, who was quintessential at, some of the big growth for Founders, which is also larger than Bell's, like 800,000 barrels, I believe. Mm-hmm. So opportunities became available at Bell's. He went over there to be the president of operations at the Comstock location. And so I'm like, all right.
Yep. Alex there. Who do we know? We know Alec.
We know Alec. Hey, Alec, do you remember your friends Dave and Clay from Sun King? From such things as a collaboration we did with Founders. He's like, oh my gosh, yes. Hey, how are you guys doing? It's our 15th anniversary. Oh my gosh, would it be so amazing if you could do a beer with us?
So it took 10 years for Sun King to partner with Bell's.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
10 years in the making, this beer. How long is it available for? What's the sitch?
When she's gone,
Yeah,
she's
it's
gone.
one and done.
Oh,
Special edition.
Yep. If you're playing it, if you're keeping score at home, although this won't be evergreen, this will kind of date it, but it's only at Sun King locations.
Oh, yeah. Which one? Okay, this brings me to, this is a great segue. I want to round up with some fun questions. Just some fun, interesting,
But what do you think of the beer?
I love it. I'm not like a super big fruit beer guy.
Yeah.
Like I like subtle fruit.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of like the GFJ, because it's not like too fruity. It's still like it's an IPA.
There is no fruit in GFJ.
There's no
whatsoever. All that flavor comes from hops.
No way.
Yeah.
100p.
It's literally grapefruits in the name, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, it was. It's called GFJ because when I went to get the original TTB designation for the cans, they told me we couldn't.
Alcohol Tax and Trade Bureau.
Yep. They told us we couldn't name it Grapefruit Jungle because it didn't have grapefruit in it. And we're like, I was like, well, we could squeeze a grapefruit in it. Dave's like, that changes the beer. Like, we'll just call it GFJ. And so I got it approved as GFJ.
Wow.
So, but this one we talked to Bell's and we're like, what do you want to do? We could do some fruit. We could just make it. We all kind of like cocktails a little bit here and there. And it's like, let's make a beer that's styled after a Paloma, something that
Bell's,
nice brunchy cocktail.
Bell's, if you see this might be the best collab you've ever done. If you see this one, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. This is
You're
really
getting
good.
some cases later this week, so they'll get a chance to taste
Oh boy! Well, then it's gonna get up into Michigan. And they're gonna see how beer's made down here in the Hoosier State.
How we do.
Yeah. All right. This brings me. We're wrapping up. We're pretty close on time.
We've hardly gotten
I
started.
know, right? I feel like we could just get a couple cases and
it. We
make
haven't
this-
talked about our Three Floyds collaborations and how they were
boy.
integral with us in changing all of those laws we talked about. Artisan Distillers Bill was born out of a conversation between Clay's father and Nick Floyd and how we wanted to do spirits and they wanted to do spirits, but it was illegal for breweries, but okay for wineries. All kinds of stuff.
We're gonna need a part two.
We
It's
give
20-year reunion.
we give yeast away to any brewery who wants it. Discounted lab services. Clay talking about just general advice, chit chatting back and forth, and all that kind of good stuff.
So if you had to narrow it down one each, I'm gonna go back and forth. We're gonna go here. If there was one thing that you wanted the state of Indiana to know about Sun King Brewery, what would it be, Clay?
I mean, we're a true Hoosier company. There's 55 people who work day in and day out tirelessly, full time. We've got another 125 part time people. But I mean, while we sell beer in other states, and I even live in another one of them where we sell beer now, we've always been really true to our Hoosier roots, and the type of people that we are and the things that we say and do. And we really tried to create a great local company that not only sells beer to the people of Indiana, but gives back to the people of Indiana, and really makes Sun King a truly good corporate citizen that is just part of the fabric of Indiana. That was the original goal. Honestly, the original goal was Indianapolis, and then we kind of gradually grew it.
We did. I would congeal all that down to we give a damn.
You give a damn.
We give a damn. We give a damn about the place that we work and live in, the environment that our people work in, how we, look at the world around us, how we try to highlight other companies in the mix, collabs that we've done with Just Pop In and countless others, right, in the mix.
What's your dream collaboration? If you could pick any company, anything, Sun King X who?
We've got a cool one coming up that is we have a meeting tomorrow with the Cake Bake Shop. Because Gwendolyn's built an incredible business there, and they actually are opening a spot in Disney in August.
On the boardwalk.
Yep, on the boardwalk, and that actually led us to our sales guy, Joe, was like, man, Cake Bake, it's Indy, it's now in Florida, like we got to get together. So he made an introduction, and they're going to run Sun King beers at all of their locations, and we do a pastry stout every winter with the collaboration. We've done it with the Flying Cupcake, with Best Chocolate in Town. And so this year, we're going to throw really rad cakes into a beer.
Very expensive, delicious cakes.
Well, when you guys are ready to do a collab with an Indiana media company and you want to do a limited release, maybe we get in. I'm like this is gonna. You guys are probably gonna hate me for this, but it's okay. I love Coors Light.
You don't have to.
I love Coors Light.
Everybody has that kind of dirty 30 rack.
Yeah, I just go crazy for it.
I'm a Miller High Life guy.
I mean, I'm still in that stage. I'm in the stage of trying to grow a business right now. So I'm in the hey, we're drinking Coors Light.
We got a High Life budget.
Yeah, right. But if there was ever a chance down the road to collab and do something fun, oh man, we could make something pretty cool happen.
All right. We like fun. We like fun. We like the collaborations and like the opportunities. We've done some of the coolest stuff we've done. We did a collaboration with Time for Three, which was the artist in residency at the Indiana Symphony. And Dave sat down with them and talked about, we took them on a tour about how you make beer, and that led to conversations. Dave and I were both in show choir. Led to conversations about music and how music is created. And they literally had this moment. They're like, creating beer is not that much different than creating music and this. And so
where's the spark of innovation?
Is that what sparked the Tyler Childers recording album and the Sturgill Simpson?
Actually,
what the world?
Sturgill made Tyler happen because Sturgill said,
you should play Sun King.
You should play Sun King because it's awesome.
Wait, how did what? Give me quickly. Give me 30 seconds on this because
we can go over time. We'll be fine.
That was awesome. I was looking up. And I was like, oh my, that's like long haired hippie Tyler Childers playing there.
Yeah, man.
Well, yeah,
that was full drug taking, drinking Tyler Childers.
Yeah.
He played 2 of our anniversary parties. Back in the day, and Sturgill was the first, so our 4th anniversary was the first time we had a big party, and we work with Josh Baker from MOKB, owns the Hi-Fi, and they're good friends and have been since our inception, him and Craig Dodge Lyle, and at the time we just talked to him, we're like, hey, we want to do this party, what do you got for an up-and-comer? And we both enjoy honky tonk, but we also like hip-hop and blues and bluegrass, and we're all over the board musically, but I'd never even heard of Sturgill at the time. I mean, this is 11 years ago. And he's like, hey, you should get this guy named Sturgill. And we looked him up online. We're like, that's pretty cool.
Man, that guy sounds like Merle Haggard. Let's do this shit.
Yeah. So they were like, okay, well, he's coming through. He's up and coming. Nobody's ever heard him. He came to play the Hi-Fi, whatever room was upstairs. I went to the show, and it was Sturgill. It was this size.
Is that like the lo-fi lounge?
It's the lo-fi lounge.
Lounge, yeah.
So Sturgill's in the corner with his band standing, and the rest of the room is here. And it's like me, my wife, Chris Ely, Molly Ely, and 20 other people that came out to see him. But he was like, he's coming to town to do this show. You should do one of these shows. We'll film it at your place. So we put it in the beer cans and we filmed the whole thing, and we all watched it and we're like, holy shit, that's hot. Turns out to this day, I show people it regularly, but the You Can Have the Crown is his #1 view on YouTube, and it has 38 million views
with the Sun King.
It's the Sun King session, and it's the cans and all of it. So
we get referenced by bands all the time, like, hey, can we do a thing where the cans are behind? And we're like, sure. So Tyler signs to Sturgill. Sturgill says you got to play Sun King and do the cans, and
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Oh my god! I was just out at the Tyler show at Ruoff, and I love that. So
Yeah, he's fantastic.
That's super.
He
super
gave
cool.
us a shout out. Awesome dude. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. Let's get into some more of these fun questions here as we go into the lightning round.
Lose some of the seriousness.
No, yeah, lose all the seriousness that we've had.
Dun, dun, dun.
Gentlemen, if you're not drinking Sun King, what are you drinking?
If I'm not drinking Sun King, I'm drinking wine.
Oh, okay. Any local winery, any winery in general you want to give a little love to?
I don't. Honestly, I buy my wine at Trader Joe's.
Little TJ's, baby.
Little TJ's. I'm not a wine connoisseur
Okay.
by any way, but I know like the styles that I drink.
I got
so
you.
like Vino Verde, Viognier. I like white wines.
Okay,
like
all right.
like dry, refreshing. I now reside in Sarasota, Florida, where it's pretty hot most of the time, and so
tragic.
If I'm not drinking wine, or if I'm not drinking Sun King, I also might be drinking the new Sun King Delta 8 and 9 seltzers.
We'll have to wrap out with what's going on there.
Okay.
Dave, if you're not drinking Sun King, what are you drinking?
Tequila.
Oh, a specific
Or
brand?
mezcal.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm a big. Yeah.
So when Dave's not drinking Sun King, he's drinking to forget something.
Always, aren't we? Is that part of the reason? No. I really enjoy the taste profile. I did whiskey. I still like brown spirits quite a bit, but I find this is new and intriguing and interesting to me. The process is different. You know, you've got these piñas. It takes 7 years to grow one to maturity. Then you've got to roast it. And depending on technique,
Isn't there only like a certain area of Mexico or something that tequila can wind up in?
Jalisco is usually where it's from. But I think any producer in Mexico, it can be called tequila.
Okay.
When we made
Thank you.
when we made our first agave spirit in Carmel, we knew that we had to call it agave spirit because, just like France, right? They make champagne. Americans don't make champagne. We make sparkling wine. So an agave spirit is what can be made outside of Mexico.
Okay.
I actually pitched at one point that we should move some distillery options or operations to Mexico, Indiana, and see if we could skirt that loophole.
We did, yeah, we
Turns
did
out you
actually
can't.
talk to the ATC, and they're like, no, not a chance. And we're like, all
I
right.
love that. Right? It's like
Nice hustle, guys.
I respect it. I see that sign all the time when I'm driving down 31.
So then we said, I guess we can't make cachaça in Brazil, Indiana, only in the country.
What about Peru? Is there
Bullcrap.
anything we could do in Peru?
I'm sure.
What kind of Peruvian spirit? I'm not aware, but I'm sure that they
sure
have.
there's- I'm
I'm
sure
sure
there's
there's a
someone.
local.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
local.
All right. We're gonna stay here, and we're gonna go. Which Sun King location is your favorite?
Have a favorite. You may have a favorite in the moment, right? And
Okay,
so
let's say like right now we're in the
Right
summer.
now.
Summer, you're hanging out. Where you want to hang out?
I'm just going to tell you that, the 15th anniversary party just happened, so that belongs to the mothership, right?
Amen. There you go. You can't beat Old Faithful.
Right.
There you go. Clay, favorite Sun King location to hang out at?
Oh, well, closest and most favorite is Sarasota, Florida. It's a tiny little tap room. It's real small. It's honestly looks a lot more like what Dave and I thought Sun King would be 15 years ago. Like when people ask him, like, this is what I thought we were starting. Turns out there's a whole nother thing. And if you're ever in Indiana, we get a lot of transplants. There's a lot of Hoosier influence. But the mothership downtown is my favorite as well. Because, I mean, it's where we were born. I love all our locations. And
Absolutely.
we worked really hard to make sure that if you've been to one, you haven't been to the other. So we're not like when I worked for Rock Bottom or we worked for the Ram. If you went to a Ram or Rock Bottom in Indy City, you could be anywhere because it's like a hotel or whatever. You're
Copy
like,
and
oh,
paste.
I'm at a Rock Bottom. You're great. Am I in Denver? Am I in Indy? Am I in Boise? But with Sun King, if you go, each one is very different.
Have their own vibe.
And they have their own vibes. So, but the mothership, like we started there, we grew it. There's so much like blood, sweat, and tears and climbing around on things. We assembled the coolers and like all of these things. Like when you walk through and like I'll regularly, my favorite time to visit a Sun King is like after hours or first thing in the morning when nobody's there and you just walk in and it's this thing and the lights are off and you're just like, wow, we did this. Like this feels
That's so
pretty
cool.
damn good.
That's so cool. Well, if you didn't love the which location is your favorite, you're probably not going to love the which beer is your favorite.
Ho, ho, ho.
So which Sun King beer is your favorite?
So beer style wise, I alternate from like crushable light lager as where my heart lies, or IPA. And so I used to be all the time Pachanga, but we just released this Indianapolis Brewing Company, which is even a little lighter. But so IBC has become like my favorite go-to. And then on the IPA front, we had a beer here. We do have it here. We have a beer called Keller Haze that is only available on draft in our tap rooms here and is available on draft and in cans in Florida. And Keller Haze is my favorite Sun King beer of all time. It's just so delicious.
Now, these are really your children.
Literally my children.
If you had to pick one.
It's whichever one I'm holding at any given time.
Amen. Okay, wait. Then I'll give you a different one then, and we'll make you pick one. Is there a Sun King beer that you thought was going to be a huge hit that tanked?
Bitter Druid.
Oh yeah, their
So
ESB.
we made this ESB. So we thought we'd have 3 beers. We'd have a hoppy beer.
That's
Osiris.
really Dave's beer.
That's my shift beer.
Okay.
But I also like to have, a taste of something out of our sour and wild program as well. So, I'm all over the board. Just like music. I'm, any kind of music, you can drop me anywhere and I'll be great with whatever the music is. So we had this thing that we thought we'd be doing a WEMAC, Osiris, and Bitter Druid ESB would be our 3 flagship beers. Like, that's what is going to happen. And then we made Bitter Druid ESB, and then we'd make another batch, and then 3, 4, 5 months later, another batch, and all the while, all the rest of our beers are, taking off through the stratosphere. So there are still 5 people who, when they see me walk through the tap room, any given Sun King tap room, will be like, "Bring back ESB."
There's a very small.
This was one of the
loyal
first
contingent.
beers too.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
It was. Sunlight was our first seasonal. We knew Osiris is the beer Dave and I designed with the hop contracts we had to be the hoppy beer that we would drink every day. WEMAC, we knew we wanted a malty beer, appeals to a certain crowd, and then Bitter Druid was kind of in between the two. And ESBs, we loved Broad Ripple ESB at the time. We'd always drink that. We're like, ESB. It did really well on Mass Ave when we first started, and it kind of had a little runaway start. And then I think it was a year and a half in, after our first full year, we were looking back at numbers and we realized that we sold 10% the Sunlight, or 10% ESB to 100% Sunlight, and it was just like, oh God. And we were kind of at that point where beers have to stay fresh, and you're like, well,
any seasonal that we ever made
sold more than ESB. And we're kind of like, this is going to make some people sad, but we literally just don't make enough
the math
of
ain't
this
mathin'.
beer. No, the math ain't mathin'.
All right. What is a lesson that you learned the hard way?
Oh my gosh. We like to refer to it as paying the stupid tax. And we've done that so many times over and over and over again where, things, you have a hunch and that's one of those sort of weird things about being an entrepreneur, right? Like, hey, we were right. We were right about Sun King. We were right about this. So we have to be right about the next thing that we're going to decide to do. And that thing was plastic kegs. So we decided to take on these plastic kegs. They were new and cool. Price point was better for us, but they had all of these magical things. Less weight, so it was less energy to move them around, so on and so forth. And they didn't blow up in our face. Unfortunately, they blew up in somebody else's face, and we learned that lesson. We had to spend.
Yeah, there was a brewery, a Red Hook brewery in Washington, and I had a friend who worked there, actually, and he called me the day it happened, and a pressure valve on a keg cleaner malfunctioned and the keg overpressurized and the keg exploded and a piece of shrapnel killed someone. So, and my friend said, I'm not even sure I'm allowed to call you, be talking to you about this, but I was at your brewery recently and you have these plastic kegs. This happened. You need to be very careful. We immediately installed double fail safes on the pressure relief valve in front of it, but we're like, we can't have these things. They ended up coming completely out of the market over the next year, pretty much.
Really?
And they got sued and there were a lot of things, but we had those and we had to, at that point, we're like, oh fuck. And at the time, thankfully it happened when it did, because we had so many of them. And we spent $50,000 on kegs to get started with in our original budget. And we maybe bought another 10,000 or so more, but to replace them with the stainless steel kegs that we ended up replacing them.
Like 250.
Yeah.
That's going to pay the stupid tax.
It was a $250,000, $300,000.
Here's a new innovation that's cool. We're going to adopt it. And we didn't let it have enough time to beta
And
test.
that's just a piece of it, right? Like, that's just a part of it where you're trying to be innovative, but then you're also, you got to kind of let someone else test a little bit of that out.
I'd say, our most recent one, and we run an open book management company. We actually share the numbers with our staff every week, the budget, where we're at versus budget we go over. We started doing this financial literacy stuff in 2018 as we were trying to figure out how we transition from Omar running the company to us running the company, which, to get back to your pandemic question, which we never even answered, it made it really easy when the shit hit the fan to look at our staff and go, all right, here's where we're at. here's what the numbers look. We're going to have to make some difficult decisions. We stopped canning beer or kegging beer at all. We moved all the way to cans. We're going to do this. There are people in this room whose jobs don't exist because the things you do can't happen. And we're going to figure out how to do that. We ended up furloughing 14 people so they could keep their health benefits and take advantage of unemployment benefits, and then still work to figure it out. We brought some of them back. We pivoted in a lot of different ways. But as we went through that whole thing, it was great because we'd spent 2 years teaching our staff what it meant to run a business, because we actually had these exercises we started doing because I read a book, The Great Game of Business, and then Dave read it, and we'd ask people, we'd be like, our staff would be like, hey, how much money do you think that Sun King makes for, every dollar that we make or in a year? We sell millions of dollars worth of beer. How much do you make? And the answers ranged wildly from 25% profit all the way up to 90% profit.
We gave everybody 100 pennies and had them divide it into buckets. How much grain costs, how much overhead, blah, blah, blah.
Raw materials, overhead, labor, everything, and how much was profit. And we were able to show, we're like, no, honestly, if we do really well in a year, we're roughly 5 cents of every dollar is profit, like 5%, not 90%.
They don't tell you that about when you start a business.
They don't. And it was also great because, again, we reinvest in our company. We are upfront with our employees, but it was also great to be able to be looking and be like, look, there's 5 of us who own the company and run this thing. And if you think, we work hard, but we get out of bed every day for 1 penny on every dollar because of the ownership structures. So, if
that's fair.
And so we were able to navigate that, and we still navigate all of our things. We do our weekly meetings, and we're like, hey, here's where we're at. Here's our budget. Here's our finances. And over the last 5 years since COVID, and with everything else, and I talk about it ad nauseum to people, the rising cost of everything, just shipping beer to Florida, a truckload. Part of the reason we put a brewery in Florida is because we were sending half truckloads, and it costs the same amount to send a half truckload as it does to send a full truckload because they book you for the whole truck. And we're like, we need to maximize logistics. So we brew beer in Florida, specifically Florida, but we do packaged beers that we move down, and we take advantage of the size of our brewery, because the stupid text thing I guess I'm getting at is we have capacity in our brewery to make more. And we've always thought of that as like, we have capacity to grow, and we're growing, but it's hard to grow, particularly in today's climate. So we're efforts to grow with new markets in Florida and some expansion into Ohio, and doing a lot of different things. But we've also we do contract manufacturing now, because we also realize for 15 years we've been a craft brewer, and recently we've realized that we're a craft brewer, but honestly we're a brewer, and at the end of the day we're a manufacturing facility. And if we've got latent manufacturing potential and it's just sitting there not being used, then yes, we make less money making other things for other people, canning beverages for other breweries, distilleries, or beverage manufacturers, but most of our bills are covered by our major operations. And as we try to figure in and factor and run a real manufacturing business and maximize our output, that's where we will grow and gain, and maybe one day make more than 1 cent on every dollar.
1.5, perhaps.
Hey, gentlemen. All right, these are the final 3 questions. These are the staple. They're staple. They're quick hitters. It's our official lightning round that we've been doing since we first started the show. What is Indiana known for?
Extremely friendly people, nice folks who will give the shirt off your back to help.
Amen. I love that. Clay, what is Indiana known for?
Honestly, I think it's knowingly unknown for great things. We talked about this when we started Sun King. Like, you've got red gold tomatoes. We have world-class tomatoes, and put Indiana tomatoes up against anywhere else. Our corn is also really great. Soybeans, huge export for edamame. Duck. Maple Leaf Farms duck. People don't know about that, but Maple Leaf Farms, if you eat duck in Peking duck in China, it probably came from Maple Leaf Farms. We've got Capriol Farms goat cheese. We've got Goose the Market, who makes the Batali sandwich, which I ate yesterday and is arguably the best sandwich on the planet, named that by Food and Wine magazine at least once. But there's
Goose the Market.
Goose the Market, yeah.
I second that.
But smoking goose, man. But there are so many. Weaver popcorn, we're the popcorn capital of the world. So there's actually all of these really great grown and handmade manufactured products in Indiana that are artisan things that a lot of the world loves and don't even realize that they come from the Hoosier State.
Mic drop. There we go. I love that. Clay, What is a hidden gem in Indiana?
I'm going to plug a spot I found just yesterday. So a hidden gem in Indiana is Frank's Paddle Sports Livery. It is located in the same building as the Indy Parks Alliance off of the White River. Do you know on 30th Street where the old armory is that is now the Heron High School?
Yes.
It is across the street from there. There used to be a golf course. You get off on 38th Street on like one on the right as you come across, you get off and go down. You can look it up online. It's Frank's Paddle Sports Livery. It's owned by a guy and his wife, and they do canoe, kayak, and paddle trips. And they'll take you up the river. They've got 3 vans. They've got a staff. It's super professional. Pete and Kate are really nice folks. Like my buddy does it, and my buddy James, and he was like, "You want to go float the Right River?" I'm like, "You float the Right River?" He's like, "Oh, dude, there's a spot called Frank's." So we go. Great. The building's cool. It's a Parks Alliance building. They got a little setup. You go, you do your waiver, $20. They'll take you up the river. There's a 5-mile canoe trip or 5-mile float that drops in Rocky Ripple, or another one where you go up and it's 7 miles. The section of the river is beautiful and it's treed and it's really nice. And so we just took paddleboards yesterday. We took paddleboards. We floated the White River. I brought some Indianapolis Brewing Company lagers that we drank, and my buddy Kurt met us, and he brought Batali's, and 5 of us floated down the river on a Sunday afternoon. We hit it right after the storms and the sky opened up, and just like I grew up in Indiana. I'm almost 50 years old, and I'd never floated the White River. And like him and his wife, their goal was to make Indy a river city. They're taking out a dam at 16th Street, and pretty soon, by next summer, hopefully they'll be able to float all the way to the White River, and then or White River State Park, and they'll run shuttles back up to Rocky Ripple.
That's
so you
awesome.
can do different segments of it. But anyway, Frank, it was awesome. I was like, wow, it was such a great way to spend a Sunday, just to be out in nature, right in the middle of downtown. You float under 65 and 38th Street right there on that section of the White River. It was crazy, but it was so relaxing and so
I love
cool.
that. I love that.
Wow.
Dave, what's a hidden gem in Indiana?
I think it's hidden in the sense that people don't realize how big it is, but the cultural trail is absolutely stunning, right? And it connects neighborhoods, and I adore it. I go for a lot of walks every day. I get my 10,000 in every day, and that's part of my exercise routine. It also helps me clear my head. It's kind of my Zen time. A lot of times I'm actually talking to this guy about bullshit that's going on. And
we spend hours and hours on the telephone staying connected and talking about this baby that we built, and
I love it.
how we go and grow it.
Okay, the cultural trail's a good one. This brings us to our final beer and our final question.
So this beer is Trippy Tails.
is it the last dab? Are we there?
Yes. By the time we're done, we've got to finish them all.
So Trippy Tails, I've never had this beer. That's why I was like, I tried Paloma Loma over the weekend, but it's we have a rotating IPA series. We do a variety pack with 4 different IPAs 3 times a year. One of them comes out as like a 16-ounce can, which goes to liquor stores and other things. So Trippy Tails, double IPA, super killer, fun artwork by our guy Mike Atwood.
Mike.
It's
Cheers,
almost 10%, so be careful.
Oh yeah,
That'll do the trick.
it's a good finisher. But when I cracked it, it just smells stank. I was like, "Oh, does this have terpenes in it?"
Oh, that's pretty good. I like that guy.
We're trying not to suck every day.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's all we all can do.
We jokingly have said that for years. It's just kind of
Gentlemen, this brings us to our final question of the day. You're gonna share you're gonna share the wealth with some other Hoosier, right? Like people are gonna come and listen to this episode because they're so curious about Sun King, and now we're gonna give you the chance to help shine light on another Hoosier. So, who is a Hoosier that we need to keep on our radar?
I got one because it's on the back of this can.
Oh,
right
True
here.
Essence.
True Essence. So we talked in the before time of this interview about innovation and other various things, and we talked about collaboration. So we have a thing going on. It's actually a company my father, Omar, turned us on to. They're like, you got to go meet Matt at True Essence, and it started as Sochati Chocolate. It's in the Circle City Industrial Complex, but I don't want to say Sochati's a front, but Sochati Chocolate is like kind of a proof of concept for one of the things that they do. Matt has how many patents?
Oh, just in chocolate? I don't know. It's like over a dozen.
He's got chocolate patents, kidney dialysis patents, and then this company, True Essence, is it's called a flavor balancing technology, and we're under NDAs, but we work with them, and particularly for like products like these Delta seltzers can have kind of a resinous, weedy characteristic, and he has a technology that you can run food products through, and at different settings will pull off flavors out of them and remove them and make them taste better. So like the first time we ever did it, he put a $3 bottle of wine, Cabernet, and let us taste it. He put it into his machine in a stainless steel bowl. He pulled it out, and it tasted like a $50 bottle of wine. It was insane. And so Matt is incredibly smart. He's one of those
great team of people.
Yeah, great team of people. He's incredibly smart. He's built a great team around him. But I think the most impressive thing about him as an entrepreneur is that like he's really smart. And sometimes when you talk to really smart people, they can't talk to investors or other public or people, but he's smart, he's well-spoken, he's easy to talk to. He's honestly brilliant, and he's been so fun. And like, as we've been working through some of just the challenges of running a business in this day and age, he's another local business person that we can sit down and talk to and talk about what you're seeing, what's going on. I mean, they just closed a $30 million round of fundraising, like a Series C fundraising, or was
no, I think it's second A.
Okay.
But yeah.
So,
Gee whiz. All right.
So, and
Matt.
Matt Rubin.
Yeah.
Matt Rubin.
We'll send an email
We
to
need to
connect.
get him on the pot here.
Yeah, for sure.
Gentlemen, this was a spectacular conversation. I loved not only enjoying the beer, but also the guys behind the beer, the stories behind the beer, and just like learning a lot more about a staple in the Indiana community, which is Sun King Brewery. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the beer. And we're going to wrap up this episode of Get In. We're brought to you by Sweetwater up in Fort Wayne. Make sure you go check them out if you need any sound or podcasting equipment. And guys, thank you so much.
First Merchants Bank.
And
First
Merchants Bank.
Huge shout out.
Yeah, a huge shout out. If you guys see this, maybe send some of those sponsorship dollars this way, and we'll make something happen. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure. Safe travels back to Florida. Keep crushing it. Here's to the next 15 years of Sun King Brewery.
Thank you, Nate.
Cheers.
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 Thank you.